All right, I'll just say real quick and then I'll turn it over to our warm-up aficionado. But I just wanted to show you the slide to officially kick off week 3. We're going to talk about literacy connections, a little bit of like just overall getting to know each other. One of those things, mapping, but other things as well. Progression theory overview will be how we round things out. Here's a little bit of our agenda. So you all should have this. It's been uploaded a few minutes before our call, admittedly, but it is up on Basecamp. You'll have the slides for it. This is the general plan for what we're trying to cover today. So with that, I would like to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Thomas Van Sage.
All right. Well, maybe you could take the slide down so we can see each other. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our third call. So we're going to just get started with kind of like we do every week, with just kind of trying to continue to get to know each other. Today, we're going to really talk about progression theory, which is something Adam and April have been working on for many years. And it's a great way to really just, it's kind of like the way the world works. And we don't necessarily give it a lot of thought intuitively, but I think when you hear it and see it, it's going to make a lot more sense. So what I thought would be fun, kind of in that spirit, is just to have each of us share kind of just how we keep ourselves organized. Like, what do you do what do you do when you set goals? Do you write them down? Do you have some kind of a way to be systematic about your own time management or goal setting system? I would just love to hear kind of how you all do that. So I can kick things off, since I was, I'm on the one that thought of this. And so I actually create like a week plan, like a week long plan every Sunday night that I kind of have everything I want to do within each of the roles that I play. So as a consultant, as a professor, as a dad, as a husband, just things that I do. And I basically just kind of list all of the things that I want to accomplish that week. So I have a really clear plan. So I'm not only just showing up to things, but also getting what I need to done. And so, and that corresponds with, I usually in January will actually have an annual plan, that I set like goals for the year. And so, so try to think through, again, within the roles, what are some of the big things that I want to accomplish? And so, so that follows this whole, I think, again, this is in line with what we'll talk about with progression theory and, what's your purpose? What are your outcomes? Why does it matter? And just kind of the methods that you use to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. So I'll just kind of ask each of you to kind of, again, I know we're getting to know each other, but just remind us, who you are, who you're with, and then maybe a few sentences about what you do to keep yourself organized and on track. So, Kristen, you're right next to me, so I'll have you go next.
Okay, you have to stop making me go first after this.
Okay, this is the last time.
Okay, thank you. Um, I'm a fairly compulsive list maker. Always have been. I'm the type that actually goes back and writes things on the list that I forgot to write on the list, but that I got done that day. So that kind of list maker. But recently I've kind of shifted to doing two things. One, I use my calendar almost as my list. It keeps track of meetings and appointments that I can't move around, but I just put work product on it. And then I can just either move that if it took longer than I thought, or if there was some reason it needed to wait till later, or I can shorten it or lengthen it based on how long it really took. So it not only helps me do it, but it helps me look back when I have similar work to say, like, what needed to get done before I could actually tackle that kind of thing. I made a shift for myself, and then I somewhat forced it upon my team a little bit to turn my computer off more often in my thinking work and do written. So I have like 3 or 4 little different books that I use for different types of work. So my notes are all together, because I remembered that I knew about myself as far back as high school that I'm really, really visual. Like if I write something down, I remember what it looks like on the page, even if I can't remember what it is, so I know where to find it. But I don't have that skill as much on digital documents. And so it just helps me to keep things on track the way it looks in my head.
That's awesome. I love that. And I love how you schedule everything that you want to do. So it's on your calendar and
Yeah, it helps a lot. And then I can also go back and write done on it because it's so easy to forget. Like, oh yeah, I was mostly done writing that letter, but then I got interrupted and I'm still sitting there in the email or whatever. So I can go back and say, yep, I did actually send that.
yeah, okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna jump around. I'm not just gonna go with who's next to me. I'm gonna go to Aaron Bradley.
It's how we set goals, correct?
Right. Yeah. Manage your time, set goals. Yes.
Yeah. I make a lot of lists as well. I always have a sticky notepad next to my desk where I just jot down the next thing to do. The visualizing helps me like to write out the list. I don't always keep the same list right in front of me, but like having written it out and prioritizing helps. Something that I've started implementing in my personal and day-to-day life when like the list gets way too long and like I could be at work till midnight, to actually get everything that feels necessary to get done. I try to like prioritize 3 things, be like, these are the 3 things that once they're completed, I can be good for the day and like move on and like wrap my day feeling confident that like I completed what needed to be done that day. So, yeah.
Good. Thank you. All right, Kate.
Good morning. So I'm admittedly not the most organized person. And so I also lists, I love checking things off a list. That makes me feel, even if it's like, I like to write things that I know I'm going to do just so I can check something off because it makes me feel accomplished. But I also came from like the education world into the library world. So I've had to really shift, in education, a lot of times my goals and my projects were created for me. Where in this role is I have a lot of freedom to do kind of my own programming, which for someone who's a little organizationally challenged can be challenging. It can be tricky, just because I have to kind of keep on myself for creating those things. So just setting lists. And I also use my calendar. It's for me, it's easy to go back at the end of the month when I'm writing monthly reports to think like, oh, here's who I spent time with, here's how much time I spent on X, Y, and Z. And then if I'm lacking in a place or think that, I should be doing more in a different area of my job, then it's visual to me that I can see like, oh, I really need to block out some space for a different project. So I'm challenged constantly in organization. So I will admit that.
Yeah. Okay. Katina.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm so glad someone else said that they were organizationally challenged before me. I won't feel so bad and feel like I'm in the world alone. But I do use my phone and my calendar, of course. If it's not on my calendar, it absolutely may not get done. And I also have a notes app on my phone as well. And so I can put to-do list on there. I can take notes on there. And then I can refer back to those things. But I also keep a written journal. And so as I'm in meetings or what have you, then I'm often taking notes in that. And I keep those and refer back to those. And if I, in that moment, can put something on my calendar or something like that, then I know that it's written down and I can refer back to it from there. So I am looking to explore a new tool from a book called, what is it from? Oh gosh, I can't think of the name of the book. But in any case, it's called Todoist. So Todoist. And so I have put that app on my phone. I have put it on my computer. And so the goal is to do a huge brain dump and begin to set priorities
All right. Well, if you think of the name of the book, let us know. I'm always looking for new ideas. So, all right, Lauren.
No, Katina, you are not alone. Kate, you are not alone. I'm really good at integrating myself into organizational systems that are pre-existing, but I am bad at developing new habits and rituals for myself. And I'm also kind of like navigating an adult ADD diagnosis at, what was I, like 30, that they're like, oh, by the way, this is probably a thing for you. And I'm like, okay, cool. Now so much about my life makes sense. So my short-term memory is not great. So I have my work stuff and my life stuff posted for the week. And then I have a calendar list, and I really like the feature on Google, where in your Gmail inbox, you can have a little task toolbar that pops out, and you can add everything that you want to that task list, including emails. There's a button you can just, I need to remember to respond to this email, and it puts it directly on your task list, and it makes it really easy to prioritize it, and set make it chronological. And also, like, as where of like a paper list, it's harder for me to like, oh no, I need to move that up, that needs to be done by the end of the week, where I thought it needed to be done by the end of the month. So I've really liked that feature, and it's worked really well for me. And yeah, it's a lot of Post-its, desperation, and technology. A little cocktail of the three.
That's interesting. Okay. I love that tool that you mentioned. So that's something I'll need to look into. Linda.
I agree with everyone. I think probably it's a product of 2023 lives that we all don't. I don't know that anybody is going to say I feel really good at being organized, and if someone does, then I want to like spend some time shadowing you. I feel like I'm always trying new systems, but I think my go-to is always handwritten things. I've tried the tasks on Gmail, and I would realize that I didn't prioritize them right, so I stopped looking at it because it wasn't what was most urgent. So I think my fallback is like I always take hand notes at meetings, and then if it's something that is an action, I put a squiggly line next to it, and then I go back through my notes and I check off the squigglies. And then I used to do a separate to-do list. I've started doing a to-do list notebook that's a different shape. So then and I keep all the old to-do list, which is kind of satisfying because I can flip back through and look at the checks of things I've completed, and also be like, oh, holy mackerel, I'm totally missed that thing, and find it in the paper notebook. But I don't know that it feels like this is a great system. It's just kind of what I've done. And then today I made a note of chronologically what I have to get done in terms of time. Like I have to leave at this time to, and so no, I don't feel like I've mastered this. And I'm excited about the idea of thinking about it in a bigger way in terms of progression theory and progressing towards goals, as opposed to feel like you're just kind of a hamster in a wheel.
All right. Good. Okay, Katie.
Good morning, everybody. I feel like this is an area that I have become very, very diligent in. So I do a lot of the things that have been mentioned, but a few things that I do maybe a little bit differently is I use Planner. We are very into Microsoft products over here at the library. So I use Planner quite a bit, and I have priority buckets. So again, like to Lauren's point, I can organize efficiently that way because I can drag and drop, move things around, whatever it might be. So something that maybe I was a back burner, then 3 months later becomes a front burner. It's easily manipulated in that way. The other thing I do that's probably the most important thing to stay up on top of things is I do like a daily download with myself every single day at the very end of the day, to set myself up for success for the next day. So I like a handwritten note as well, like in the moment, or if I take a phone call, I usually write it down. But I download like what happened today, what action items do I have, and I put that into my calendar, or put it on a to-do list, or put it on I should think about this more in the future list so that I never like lose it. And it helps my mental load stay where it needs to be, and it lets me go home at the end of the day. And then I have like, this is urgent for tomorrow. And I have it already ready so that I know what I need to do. And that has really, really helped me. And I think having a small person in my life, becoming a mom, changed that game for me. Like I could just work whenever and it was no big deal. But having to really figure out a process, being forced into that a little bit in the best way, really changed the game for me. So that I'm very, very diligent of having a daily download with myself at the end of the day.
Yeah, and Linda just asked, is that daily download digital?
Yes, I translate everything from paper into digital so that I have it everywhere. If I'm out and about, I still have access to kind of like where I do my brain dump. And right now that's in Planner. So, and it's great. It has lots of tools for you to be able to organize. You can attach things to, you can email, yourself stuff, and it's pretty flexible in that way. I've enjoyed it, but it's also kind of like what we do here. So, we all kind of try to do the same thing, but yeah. Thank you.
Good. All right. You've inspired me. That's great. Okay, Jillian.
I think I'm like on the opposite end of the spectrum from Katie. Every Monday morning, I will, though, typically, I don't know about I try to go through my calendar for the entire week. That is my work calendar, my volunteer community activity calendar, and my 3 children's calendars, and I try and put it all on one piece of paper, and my to-do list runs down the side of it, and that's about as organized as it gets.
Okay. All right, Jenny.
I do a lot of lists, and my husband makes fun of me for my lists because they say things like vacuum, paint the house, get a new car. They're kind of crazy, but they're all in one spot, and I just keep transferring them. We'll eventually get to them. So it's kind of like the annual, year list. We just, we'll just eventually, once I finally get fed up with, I don't want this on my list anymore, then that's usually when it happens. So, but I also do a calendar that's just a book calendar, so I can visually look through it and see what we've done for the month, what's coming up. And then for home, I have, I do all of my grocery shopping on the weekend, and we plan out the menu, and it works well because if the food's in the house, the husband will cook. So it works well, and we go through, and that's how organized I am.
Okay, good. I like how you had vacuum or paint the house. I was like, okay, that's amazing. Okay. Kimberly, we just got started a few minutes ago. I'm asking everybody to just share how you keep yourself organized, how you set and accomplish goals.
Okay, I apologize for the delay. I had to do some subbing this morning. Right now, recently, I've just been using the sticky note feature on my computer. That's helping keep my day a little bit more focused and tiered. And I definitely live by my calendar, so I have to check it out every day. I, like Jillian, I have 4 kiddos and I'm trying to keep track. So we got family calendars, I got work calendars, so that's the way I stay alive.
Well, I'm amazed at how broad, and everybody has a different way of doing this, and I think that's fascinating. But I'm gonna kick it back over to Adam to get into the first half of our meeting.
Yeah, and that really is a kind of fantastic. We all have different methods for how we try to produce our outcomes. So let's bring it all the way back to purpose. This is an aspect of progression theory. It says basically everything humans can do is made up of these 3 things. Everything on your to-do list has a reason why. It has outcomes that you're trying to produce. And then basically the things on your to-do list are methods. And what's funny is painting the house might be a high level method, maybe more like a strategy. And then vacuuming a room might be more of a specific action step or operation. So methods have different levels, which we'll get into at some point. But for today, I just want to start with our purpose, and purpose can be overwhelming. So I just break it down into 2 smaller questions. The purpose is really, what is our focus? It starts with that a point. So I propose, and I'm going to kind of go through it a little fast, but I would welcome anybody's feedback if we're not on the right track. But it's about continuing to build a shared thought bubble. I mean, shared thought bubble as in, when we think about literacy in Kansas City, are we all thinking about the same thing? You know, does literacy mean the same thing? Are the outcomes we're going for the same thing? Are the methods we're going to use, are they compatible, or are they actually divergent? So that's the focus, and it kind of is our continual focus. That is what coalescing means, in a way. That's an aspect of coalescing. And then I'd be interested for you, any reasons why it matters. So, for example, if we individually see the problem only from our subjective point of view, then what would happen? Or collectively seeing the problem with unity would allow us to what? I think the answers to those, or filling in the blanks, would answer that. So yeah, any response to why it matters for us to build that shared thought bubble?
I'd say so we can all, have some buy-in, if we're not all going to the same thing, we may not put as much effort in.
Nice. Thank you. Good. Any other reasons? All right, so for outcomes, then the idea here is purpose allows us to then kind of project outward into the future and say, all right, what would be the results? What would tell us we enhanced our shared thought bubble more? What would tell us we all have more buy-in? And I think, maybe seeing if our agenda will get us there a little bit, learning about each other and going through developing some shared language. So any other, I'll just put that there, shared language. Is there any other reasons or outcomes that would show you we built more of a shared thought bubble?
Yeah, I think so not only common language, but I also think like stating what the problem is and making sure we're all clear on what the problem is very essential as well. Because then we really know that we're in agreement with, some basic facts of how we've gotten here, where we are, all of those things. So that then as we begin to piece the solutions together, then we are all kind of on the same page. So one, we know what we mean when we say certain terms, but two, we actually know what we're solving for.
Very good. Yeah, so it might be kind of clarifying the purpose, which I think will happen when we do some breakouts. What we'll do is when we get to this part, when we get to progression theory, we'll do some more clarifying and get into some breakouts to talk about that. So that's great. Thank you. What else for today would help us create more of a shared thought bubble, or help us bring ourselves more into common language and common way of seeing things? So I would like to maybe do some follow-ups from your literacy connections, to hear how things went. How well do we know what each other does? So I think that could be another potential outcome for today. All right, we can come back and add to it. Our methods for how we're going to get there would be this agenda, unless you have any other agenda items you'd like to add. Okay. We can come back to it. So moving forward, we'll now move into the housekeeping. So what I want to do is open it up for any questions, reflections from last week, and then I'll turn some things over to April. So yeah, if anything from last week that was a reflection or an insight, just something, you know, that might have been left over that you'd want to share with the group. We have a couple of minutes to hear from anybody on that.
Yeah, thoughts on, you know, the Clifton strengths, your themes of talent, how you're seeing those show up in your life, anything like that.
Interesting to see how different people went about finishing our homework. Like, I know myself, and it would not have gotten done if I didn't immediately schedule it directly after this meeting. And so that's what I did. And I scheduled it with Bev, who I knew is similar to me. And so we were just going to knock it out, right? We're just going to do it. But then other folks were like, I'm going to send a very thought out, like very impressive written, you know, response to each question, very explicitly answering each question. You know, Bev and I have like a 25-minute conversation that kind of touches on each of the questions that we were asked to talk about in our homework. And I'm like, check, okay, done. And then I just think it was so funny to watch how people, you know, approached the homework. And I think it has to do with our Clifton strengths and with how we approach things and our organization styles and everything. So yeah.
I had a really great conversation with Kimberly. It was really, I enjoyed this homework assignment a lot. Because initially I set out and I tried to make contact with somebody. My idea was like, I really want to talk to someone that I know the least about in this group, and so when I also put my message out on Basecamp, I was really pleased that Kimberly responded to me, because she and I haven't worked together before. And so I got to have some insights, but I got to learn about her as a person, and then also learn about her role within Literacy KC, and learning about, so if her organization is directing resources specifically for her role, like how much they value, like where their values are as an organization and where their priorities are for the people that they're serving. And so that helped me learn more about Literacy KC overall. And then also just knowing, making sure that we have adult learners covered in this group is really, really important. I'm glad that that Kimberly is here and sharing their experiences with us.
I love that. And yeah, we're going to actually do a deep dive into the homework exercise soon, but I love that taste. I love that everybody is enthusiastic about it. And yeah, I think Jillian, your observation of just getting like a snapshot and like how people approach tasks through that homework is like fascinating. I love it. Any other thoughts from last week? Yeah, so I can take some of these other housekeeping items. Thank you guys for being here. And I just want to appreciate everybody for prioritizing this in their schedules and being so communicative. I've seen a lot of people on Basecamp. That's wonderful. I love to see that engagement. If you're running into any issues with using Basecamp or still a little bit unsure how to use an interface with the technology, let us know. We want to make it easy for you. So happy to give a little tutorial for whoever needs it. But I've actually just been so happy to just see you guys run with it. And I've seen a lot of exchanges and back and forth. So that's just lovely. Also, just as a kind of a reminder, we really do want to see people here, and those who are not able to be here, giving us as much of a heads up as possible in terms of letting us know explicitly if you're not going to be able to make a meeting. And I know maybe we hadn't mentioned that kind of explicitly as the norm, especially for those of you that have multiple representatives per organization. But really, I think in terms of planning for Adam and Tom and I, and also just so that we can make sure that we're moving forward in a way that everybody's looped in. We totally understand people need to miss meetings sometimes, but just letting us know ahead of time is something that we would request moving forward. Also just wanted to share quickly, and this is actually at Kristen's request, we wanted to let you know as sort of a transparency measure that Kristen, as the holder of kind of this larger grant with School Smart, we meet with her on a weekly basis to talk about compliance and administration stuff, essentially. And so we just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that that was happening. And if there's any concerns with that, of course, we're happy to discuss it. But more importantly, I think from us as consultants, we just want to extend an invitation. If anybody would like more FaceTime with us, we're happy to set up meetings at any time to talk about, where you think the coalition is going, or ideas that you have, or even, individual coaching related to your organizations. I think, we'd love to be able to, talk to you about what your goals are, that sort of thing. So, just wanted to throw that out there as an invitation, and maybe just, invite people to reach out to us on an individual basis if you have any thoughts or requests according to that. And then the last thing I think for housekeeping was just to give everybody an update on some membership shifts. So I think for those of you who are checking Basecamp, you may have seen Polly's message that she's actually stepping away from the coalition during her transition period. Sounds like she has a new ED on the way, and she's also, transitioning to another job in this period. So we just want to wish her well, and we also want to thank the other members of her team, Linda and Bev, for kind of carrying the torch during the transition time. I think you all are going to be the main point of contact for us for the coalition, and then the new ED, hopefully we'll get them once they're onboarded and they see if they have time for this. But just wanted to make sure everybody knew that, as well as I think so for Front Porch Alliance, I'm not sure if we made it clear. I think Jatem is stepping back, and Erin, you are stepping in for her. So Erin is our new main point of contact for Front Porch Alliance. Any questions? Is that all clear? Just want to make sure everybody knows, who's in the group.
Yeah, and I think that it's going to be in flux for a little bit. We're still stabilizing the group. Maybe there's some people that need to be here, that aren't here yet, and the coalition would decide that. And so that's a very important aspect of what we're doing, is making sure we have the people in the room that need to be here, and that we're coordinating together. So the coalescing process, even though we're doing it now, it's going to keep continuing. And we wanted to, maybe even, at some point clarify membership and any other people that need to be here. So do we have time on our agenda to just see if there's any clear thought? I'm calling it an audible here, but just any thoughts on who organizations that need to be here as we've come together more? Any clarity on who else needs to be here? And if you don't know now, you can also send that in. Go ahead, April, you want to say?
Well, happy to hear thoughts on that. I think we're going to get into this next piece, which will kind of get into how we're all linking together as a coalition. But let's go ahead and hear your thoughts on that. Thank you, Linda.
Oh, I was just curious. We had a representative from KCPS, moving up to this point, and I assume that we don't have a KCPS rep now.
Yes, so we're in process. We've been in touch with Julia, and it sounds like she may be able to rejoin the coalition, but it sounds like she's essentially waiting for her supervisor to greenlight it. And I know Kristen's been kind of working on the backside. Do you have any updates for the group?
I haven't. Apparently, according to Julia, the MOU had to be signed by Dr. Collier. Which just always will take time, but I have reached out by email to make sure that Dr. Collier had all the information about the group that she might want. Angelique has also reached out because they are working together a lot with the Royals project, so hopefully that all helps it move along.
And would there be someone from like a charter schools coalition that could join in too? I'm just thinking, like, if they're involved from the ground level, they might be more apt to partner with whatever we come up with.
So this actually leads us to transition. Why don't we just jump right into that, April? I'll put that slide up. Are you ready to go into that?
Yeah, and I mean, I think, yeah, you can go ahead and throw up the slide. I think in general, we're starting to reach the point where, and I think, the focus over the last couple of weeks has been really learning who is in the room and getting to know each other. And that's been a focus of the Literacy Connections exercise. So really kind of before we can, take action as an effective unit, we need to understand all the pieces of the puzzle and how everybody fits together. And, what are the strengths and assets and needs of our different organizations, and how can we, fill those gaps? And so, there's the Literacy Connections exercise is something that we actually wanted to debrief with you a little bit, to talk about, what did you learn about each other, and what did that exercise tell you about, how well you know each other. I think, one of our questions as consultants is, how can we support you on this learning journey? But we can't tell you, what you do or don't know about each other, or, what will help you, work together as an effective unit. And so we really just want to be able to, support you in that journey. So we're going to open it up. I'm going to ask you guys about the Literacy Connections exercise, but kind of before I do that, maybe to test or to prep everybody a little bit, I wanted to just share a couple of tools that already exist, that you guys can take advantage of. And I want to have a better understanding of, whether you use these tools. So I know that the Urban Education Research Center created like a geo-mapping tool for you all. And I understand, discussed it with a couple of you, Kristen included, that it came out, quite recently. And I don't know if this is something that you all have really, had an opportunity to really dig into and understand, how it can serve you in this work of what we're doing together. But I just wanted to give, the briefest of orientations. So, this is kind of what the interface looks like. If you go over here and click the little legend button, it looks like a bunch of bullet points. It opens it up and it kind of shows you, this is organized by district. Each district has its own color. And then the different circles represent different types of sites that are covered by sort of different thematic areas, or we can call them like different points of literacy across the lifespan. So, the red dots are focused more on pre-K, the blue dots are hospitals and clinics, green dots are K through 12, purple are kind of more generally community-based, and then finally, we have libraries as their own color. So if you scroll in and you want to see, who is working where from, the 10 organizations that are represented in this coalition, you can, click a specific location and it opens up. It tells you, okay, this is the location. It's an elementary school, and the organizations that are active here are Turn the Page KC, and the specific program that they're using in this location is the Early Childhood Educator Network. So again, you can kind of click around and see who is doing what where, essentially. That's the purpose of this, tool, but also, taking kind of a high level look, where are the resources distributed? Where are the gaps? Where are, opportunities to work together? So, I do encourage you, if you haven't already, to kind of click around with this tool and use it as a way to learn about each other. And yeah, I also just wanted to, ask, I think from what I understand, there's some sort of mechanism to keep this information updated, like every 10 or 12 months, I think was the agreement initially, but yeah, I'll just stop there and ask, have you used this? Do you see this as useful? How can you use it? What would be kind of the ideal use for this tool? And how can we make sure that it's updated with the information that you need for it to be useful? So any thoughts on any of those questions?
Can I just throw in a little background info, because
Yeah.
a few folks that are here now may not have been the representative for their organization that was here when this kicked off. And to Lauren's point, I think Mid-Continent didn't get involved in the data sharing when we started. So this came about because Turn the Page was working with UMKC for our Read 360 program, and they were helping us think through some of these sort of geo issues for that. But at the same time, I saw the conversations we were having would benefit from it. So the reason it says Read 360 a lot on there is that they were actually contracted with us for that. So they just sort of threw this into that. But we all sat down around, I want to say June or July, it was sometime in the summer, I think, and completed a spreadsheet saying just, what are all the different programs that we run or initiatives that we're working on, and where do they happen or where do they impact children or teachers or families. And then they took that spreadsheet and fed it all in. It took a really long time just because we had to figure out how to make sense of a lot of really different kinds of data and how to represent it in a way you could possibly understand visually. And then it came out right as we got funding to start this. So I shared it and we were all really busy thinking about other things. So that's why it may feel like you haven't seen this yet. And we continue to work with UMKC on our project, but they have put in place, and they were agreeable to either every 6 months or every 12 months for us to just review that spreadsheet, add in more. The updating is a really very simple process at this point. So just so you're aware.
Perfect. Thank you for the context. And yes, I have dropped this in Basecamp under Docs and Files under Coalition Resources. So you guys should always be able to find that there.
So just a quick follow-up, Kristen. So to that end, obviously MCPL really isn't represented on there in a way that we could definitely bolster that quite a bit coverage-wise. So what would be the best way? Is that to fill out that spreadsheet then, and then the next time it gets updated, our information will be included, or?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I will dig that out. It's somewhere here in front of me on all my lists. And send it to you, and we'll just I think we just all had our own sheet in the spreadsheet in the Excel file. And I can just go ahead and shoot it over to the woman who created this and see if she could just throw that in before there's a full-on update.
Excellent. Well, I apologize for not already having that on there, but we'll be happy to make it so. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, definitely. It sounds like this is kind of in the first stages of being used. So this is the time for people to jump in. I don't know, if there's any opportunity to build out this tool. Definitely, on our side, I wanted to just say, our interest is in developing, learning products that will guide you kind of in this journey of learning about each other and coalescing together and forming a unit. So, yeah, I'd be curious to hear, do you think that this is going to be a useful tool for you? Do you see specific uses, as a coalition? Is this enough, or do you see other things that you need? Yeah. Just any thoughts on any of that?
I'm just looking briefly, and there's some more things that I'm just noticing about like the library that may not be a part of the current stuff. So maybe just updating some of like either locations or programming. And obviously this has been a while since we initially did this, but just looking at my own data, it would be, I think, useful to update some of that if we're going to move forward and keep it current.
And I'm sorry, Kristen, you might have already said this in terms of they're willing to update it on a, systematic basis. Do you have a target idea of let's update it in May, or let's update it so we can kind of?
Well, all that my target is that it becomes something that's just easy to sustain. But I kind of think of this as still the startup process, like we're adding, in a whole entity that's not there at all. So, maybe we could get MCPL added in, and then I can chat with them about like maybe January is a good time of year to just kind of reboot And we can see whether at that point, whether we think twice a year, like, January and July makes sense as times when new programs kick in or something, something like that. But I'm totally open. If there are other ideas, let me know and I'll take that to them.
Great. One other thing I'll just put on your radar quickly. I did post this on Basecamp, and again, it's under Docs and Files under Coalition Resources. But we created from the interviews and the surveys that we put you all through, and you were also kind to develop out. I just wanted to show you that this information belongs to you, and we've taken some time to do really just a very rough digest of what we heard, and kind of getting it into the right categories and making initial kind of conclusions of like the patterns that we saw from that information. So I don't know if you've had an opportunity to kind of scroll through some of it. It is a lot, and we don't necessarily expect you to do this, a deep dive read of kind of this rough, outline. But I did want to just share it with you all so that you can use it as a starting point for, thinking about things that you want to learn from each other, learning products that we can create for you, conversations that you need to have as a coalition. Again, before we're able to move together as a unit, we need to understand each other and our organizations and kind of go through that process of getting that shared thought bubble, that shared language. And so, for example, this landscape overview that was based on the interviews, there's a basic program overview as self-described for each organization that could be interesting for you to look through. We tried to do a compilation of ideas for innovation. What are the data realities and needs? How can we teach literacy better? What are, our common definitions for that? Where are areas you all see duplication of services or gaps in services? So again, just sharing that, this document exists. The other thing that we have,
can I just, I would like to ask, has anybody in the group read it yet or looked through it yet? I'd love to see if there's any reactions to it. Yeah, I'd love to hear. Go ahead, Katie.
There's someone vacuuming right outside my door, so I may not, if it's like crazy loud, please tell me. I really didn't deep dive into it, but I reviewed the information on the people that I spoke to for our little interviews last week, just to get a sense of things and see if there's anything I was particularly interested in learning more, or if there were easy jumping off places that I thought we could collaborate and those would be worth exploring. So I use that as just like, because a lot of you are very new to me, so it was great to have at least something to kind of think through that a little bit on. But I am looking forward to learning more and digging in. I just haven't had the space on the calendar to do that yet, but that's definitely a goal for this week, I think.
Wonderful. Yeah. I mean, as I read through it and I was at the interviews, I found myself kind of just clarifying the things before this group. It helped corral many of the different topics that are out there. Good. Any other reactions to this?
Yeah, and the other topic, so there was sort of a landscape digest that was really based on the interviews of kind of your shared analysis of what are the problems and what does the situation look like in Kansas City. The other digest was based more on the surveys, which was more of a strategic overview of what you all think are, the vision and priorities for this initiative. How do you measure success? What are the factors that would ensure the coalition's success? These sorts of things that will really become very helpful when we're doing the strategic planning, which is coming up very soon. But again, could be just a useful document to kind of read through, get an understanding of the baseline of where we all are at right now, and how we can grow from that. But again, just want to share this to reflect back to you some of the rich expertise and detail that you've shared with us, but also we really want to be able to facilitate a learning experience and a learning agenda around a lot of this as well that is useful to you. So if you have specific ideas for for learning products, like if it would be helpful to have a digest of what everybody does and what their programs are, that's something that we could develop for you. Really, we would want to take your lead in terms of what you all think are the gaps in terms of your knowledge and what needs to be filled. So with that, we just have a couple of minutes, but I'd love to hear, your thoughts on that question of what would you like to learn about each other, and also kind of with the lens of the activity with Literacy Connections. What was that like for you? Were there surprises that came out of that? Did you identify, did it raise more questions about what you need to learn? Or did you realize you actually already knew each other pretty well? Like, I'd love to just kind of get a little bit of reflection around that. And yeah, again, this is kind of the beginning of the conversation, but I'm just, want to see where you all are at.
I think I had kind of I felt like I had a sense of what everybody did, but I think I'm now more curious about kind of the day-to-day priorities within organizations, and I think that's something that this process has helped us think about internally as well. Like, we're a reading and mentoring nonprofit, and we've got lots of offshoots, and I manage a lot of the offshoots. So kind of figuring out, like, as we're moving forward, I'm hopeful about seeing how our offshoots connect with other organizations, how our main, things connect. And I guess I'm curious about other organizations. Like, what is like this is our main driver, or maybe there's not. Maybe other organizations are like, we have 4 buckets and we evenly distribute our priorities and time in those kinds of things. I'm curious about that.
I love that.
This is really helpful for me because I feel like kind of late to the party. So meeting with Lauren was really, really helpful just to understand a little bit more about Turn the Page. Like, I know more about Turn the Page from prior versus what's happening right now. So any opportunity for me to just kind of get an understanding of like what each organization is doing, and then what the particular people in this meeting are doing, that kind of helps me think more holistically of like, oh, this is how we can interconnect. So having that conversation with Lauren, we were already like kind of diving into some different ideas and trying to figure out just in things that we have coming up, like how we can better connect. So I felt like it was real meaningful to just know more about her personally and her role there, and vice versa.
That's great to hear. I love it.
I'm hoping to continue this a little. I was out of town really the end of last week till like late last night. So I was the one that sent the like annoying list of like, here's my answers to, and did connect, kind of briefly with a couple people, but I hope, like Kimberly, I would love to have a conversation. I just hope that this is something we can, if we didn't get to connect this week, again, my calendar was just wonky last week. And so I kind of had to improvise, but I hope that there's a few of you that I really know a lot about, the work that you do, but I still would love to maybe keep this going in the future. So.
That's awesome. And yes, as a spoiler, this will be another, we're continuing this homework item for the next week. So we'll be asking all of you to set up another meeting and then continue to have these conversations. But it's great to hear that you see that as useful exercise.
Yeah, I think that, as we move forward, there's a couple of, like, you asked about the map, and let me say, first of all, Kate, it was not annoying. It was really impressive. And, and I just was impressed that you like really were so thoughtful about answering the question. So not annoying at all. And I learned a lot about you. But you asked about the map earlier, and to me, it's like, it's not what the map shows, it's what the map doesn't show. There's areas of town that don't have services, or there's schools or areas where there's a lot. And, like, for instance, I had a conversation with the superintendent of KCPS not long ago, and I said, do you know that we're both running adult ed programs at Penn Valley? And she said, no. And I said, well, don't you think that our resources would be better used if one of us stayed at Penn Valley and the other left and took it somewhere else? And so those opportunities, I think, like look at saturated areas. Is that necessary? Okay, no, let's look at the map and say, where could we potentially, you know, co-locate, relocate, redirect resources, whatever it might be. And then I think we do need more sort of spontaneous conversations to happen. And I don't mean completely spontaneous, I mean sort of assigned spontaneous, because that's where like we discover the opportunity for collaboration, you know, and say, oh, I had no idea, you know, I met with the ED of the library, John Heron, not long ago, and I had no idea about some of his, you know, his personal and organizational priority areas, and they really align with what Literacy KC is doing, you know. And I think that's where the ideas are going to be formulated that are going to come up, and that's where the spontaneous connection for potential collaboration down the road happens. You know, it's not just here's a map of what we do, but like Lauren and Kimberly, you know, you guys were like, oh, we have this symbiotic thing happening, so let's figure out how we can leverage each other to do that. And I just think the more opportunity we have for that type of conversation, the better we will identify how we can leverage each other to better serve the community.
And I think too, piggybacking off that, I'm hopeful as a result of this that we have a sense of, you know, we kind of decide what are our big categories or priorities, and then when we see a spontaneous opportunity, we're like, okay, this has to do with book distribution as an example. And so let's think about all the literacy partners, you know, what are they doing with that? And let's bring them all to the table and say, how can we do this better? And I mean that, or not necessarily better, but just so we kind of are all like feeling like we're part of something, or we have an option to be part of it. We might say we don't have the bandwidth right now, but just so we kind of maybe are more systematic in our approaches that way.
I'd like to jump in and just say, Jenny and I had an amazing time, I think, getting to know each other. I think learning like the why, how we found ourselves doing this work, and as well as learning about the organizations, the work that it's done in the past, where it is now, and then where it sees itself in the future. And as we ascertain what we as organizations do really, really well. And then as we look at this map and we think through programming and all of these things, then having some conversations around like, hey, you do this really, really well, but this may be something that you don't do really well, but this other organization over here does that really well. So maybe that's a program that you no longer need to invest resources in. And then we just refer them to this other organization that's a part of the coalition. And, you know, so just thinking about our talents, our programming, you know, the past, the present, the future, those gaps, the redundancies, all of the things collectively, and then making some really strategic conversations of what we do as individual organizations and the collective, I think is going to be amazing. And I think I heard some of that in our conversations, or where we might collab and support and teach each other about certain things within the space. Because although all of us work in literacy, I think some of us have expertise in certain areas within the space. And so that then opens up an opportunity for us to educate one another as we continue to do the work, if all of that makes sense.
I love that, Katina, and it makes me think, Linda and Jillian, about sort of the conversations that led to our collaboration around the book vending machines. So I hope that you all have seen all the big, beautiful pictures of the vending machines that were placed recently, but that was something that the opportunity came up for us. And I could not really fathom how we had the capacity to do what needed to be done to make it truly successful by ourselves. And the main part of that was that I knew we had to have ongoing relationships with the schools, not just put a machine in and bring books once in a while. And we're 3 people and we don't do that in part of our work, but I knew Lead to Read did. So I reached out to Linda to say, like, we can bring the books if you can build the team. And she jumped on it, but they could only cover 2. And so I reached out to Jillian to say, like, you kind of have a school-based program, and they had a great relationship already with the school. And so it really just all came together based on what we were already doing. And now we are all stronger at doing that because the component pieces all came together. So I hope that that's the example I've had in my head since we started these meetings, is just that, when we can take advantage of what we're already doing well, and not recreate the wheel every time, helps.
I love that as a concrete example. Yeah, we need more of that. Lauren, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up one of the points when I'm looking at this, these prompts for this slide. What are the things we don't know that we need to find out? Something that, and Kimberly, I want to give her credit for bringing this up in our conversation, was like, where do we bring in the voices of kind of like lay community members, people who are, lots of us in this group are parents and caregivers. But, when we're thinking about who has a place in this conversation and who is missing, that was something that she brought up that I 100% agree with, is, where in this process, will, everyday community members have a place in even just like getting to know what kind of work we're doing here, or have some kind of feedback or play a role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably for maybe the next conversation, we'll really have more time to get into the analysis of, who, where do we all fit in literacy across the lifespan, and who else needs to be in the room, because this is something that keeps coming up, and that came up often in the interviews. But before we really had that conversation, we wanted to make sure that you knew who was in the room and how y'all fit together and all of that. So I think we're starting to get to the point where we have that understanding, and now we can move to the next step of really making sure that we have the group as representative as it needs to be to get this job done. So I think for now, if it's all right with you, I think we'll stop there in the interest of time, but we'll pick it up next week, and do be thinking about that question of, the learning agenda of what you need to know to actually, feel like you're an effective unit, and also, how do we want to build that out? Who else needs to be with us in this effort to really cover that literacy across the lifespan continuum? That said, I think is now a good time for a break, Adam, and then we'll come back for progression theory.
Yeah, I think we'll come back, and our conversation will be, how do we get from where we are to where we want to be? How do we make that progress? So with that, we'll set a timer for 5 minutes, and then we'll meet on back and do it. So yeah, but I've definitely been hearing a lot of different methods for how we stay organized, how we want to move things forward. Heard a lot of ideas for what the group is needing could help the group coalesce more. There was a lot of enthusiasm for the getting to know each other that's been happening, a desire to do more of that. And that is the coalescing process. And it's a process. I wish all of us with our ambitions could just jump right in and get to work and roll up our sleeves and start doing things. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we doing that? Yeah, let me ask you all, why aren't we doing that? Why isn't that the first thing we do when we coalesce?
I think
We don't
we're
know
waiting for
enough about, we don't know enough about each other and how we work, how we think, what our priorities are, whether they're aligned or if they're competing. And if we don't know those things from experience, I have learned that it can equal disaster.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Jenny.
I think we're waiting for someone to tell us how high to jump, you know, what to do.
Okay.
Where are we going?
All right. Yeah. We're waiting for them to tell us, and then them is us. But we have to know who we are. As Katina just said, we have to understand where we're at and where we're going. I think one of the biggest problems would be to spend our resources before we knew where the best place to spend them would be. And so it's this process. There's a tension, all right? It's a dynamic tension. It's not a bad tension. It's the tension between, I want to get something done, but what of all the things I could do, what are the best ways to spend my resources? So some people are like, let's just get started and we'll figure it out. And other people are like, no, we need to plan until the end of time. I mean, they don't say that, but they're never really ready, you know? So we have to find the right mix, because once we spend our resources, then they're spent, you know? So it's the way I address the tension. And also the tension is fueled by this need to do something, this impulse in our society to do, execute, make things happen, and all of that. But the way I would like to propose we resolve the tension is just with this kind of, you know, a vague saying that goes like this: we should go slow to go fast. Not totally slow, not, you know, but if we start creating a plan now, I just feel like that would be going fast to go slow, because we would probably be rewriting the plan or redoing it, right? Yeah. And so we're coming together to, you know, we're coalescing, and we don't want to rush into it. We don't want to rush through it, but we do want to have a methodology, an approach, and a game plan. And that's really what I'd like to get into a little bit with you all today. And we've been referring to it as progression theory, and we've already shared little bits and pieces of it, but I want to talk a little bit about where it comes from and just some of the ideas behind it, and then really what is it trying to do? Where are we going with it? And so to back up, it's really that in my career of 25 years of working with organizations to help them do this same thing, we're trying to make something happen. We're trying to convert the resources we have into the outcomes we want. That is the basis of all planning, all strategy, all strategizing. That is the reason organizations exist. The reason organizations exist is that of all the ways humans have been able to make progress, organizing has proven to be one of the most absolutely effective. So whichever group of humans organizes the most effectively are the humans that get to make progress. Wow. So organizing effectively, let me just say that organizing effectively is what we're trying to do. That's what a coalition is. That's what growing together, coalescing means. And so I just want to introduce some ideas to begin with. And the first idea is really one that I think underscores all of it. It is one that leads to every result in our life, and the word for it is continuation. That what we're doing is we're trying to continue in the best way possible, and something about continuation is that it's a force we've never been able to overcome. There's nothing really that I know of that's more powerful than it. Here's what I mean. Everything that exists today, everything that is in existence right now, exists because of what immediately preceded it. And everything that preceded it existed because of what preceded that. And so we can almost see that, like, you could go big picture on this, you know, you could go cosmological on it, you could go anthropological on it, you could go just in your own life. you know, from where you started to where you are now, has been continuation. Everything that you have in your life now is because of what preceded it, and everything that you had that preceded is what preceded that. And then, you know, going back to our ancestry, even, you know, our DNA even. So continuation is this unspoken kind of force that really drives everything. And then that's what, and we earlier we talked about planning, and why do we plan is because we know that there's going to be a next moment. What are we planning for? We're planning for the continuation, right? So it's kind of a weird thing to talk about. I know it is. As I mentioned early in the call, I'm a little eccentric, and it just hit me one day that continuation is this incredibly powerful force. No one's talked about it. It's implied in everything, though. Nothing disagrees with it. Whenever I've talked this way, no one's come out and said, that is absolutely wrong, you know? It's hard to argue with. It's hard to contend with even. But what I realized is that you could do something with it. See, and we always have. We maybe didn't put words to it, but when we harness the recognition of continuation, like right now, you know, you're going to be somewhere tomorrow, and you're going to be somewhere next week, and you're going to be somewhere a year from now. And the idea is, where do you want to be, and what can you do now that would set you up for the future? So if we know there's going to be continuation, why not harness it? And we do, to varying degrees of like intentionality. So progression theory is just saying, let's do it intentionally. Let's harness continuation, and let's use it to set ourselves up continually. Let's set ourselves up to set ourselves up to set ourselves up to set ourselves up. And when we do that, I call it progression. Continuity is natural. It happens on its own. Continuation, there's nothing we can do to stop it. And a lot of times it's going to go in directions we don't want it to. We call that contrast versus alignment, but that's a story for another moment. Let me just see, are there any comments to anything we're saying so far? Anything? Okay. Just reading the comments. Any reactions to anything I'm saying so far? All right. So what is the point of continuation or progression? And how does it relate to us and what we're trying to do? Well, what I'm hoping to do by introducing it is have a shared language, have some tools, have some things that will tell us, you know, how do we know we're aligned? How do we know we're not? How do we know we're making progress? How do we know we're not? How do we know we're going in the right direction? How do we know we're not? And it's these kind of tools that I think will help. And so let's begin. So in order to have that shared thought bubble, I guess I'm going to do some drawings, and, you know, but it's like each of us might have our own little thoughts in our heads for what is literacy in Kansas City, you know, and that image may be different. I'm drawing with the mouse, so it's not that great, as I say, but you know, what I want to see is, instead of each person having their own separate thought bubbles, is that we all sort of build one shared thought bubble for what it is, you know, really on three things. Why we're doing this, to what ends are we doing this, and then the how we will reach those ends. And if we can create a shared thought bubble around those three things, then that is going to be an extremely vital factor of coalescing. It's vital to you all. It's vital to couples. It's vital to organizational leaders or boards of directors. It's vital to our political leaders. To the degree we have shared thought bubbles, we thrive, and to the degree we have separate thought bubbles, we struggle. So progression theory is in part meant to help us with that. Any reactions, any thoughts as we... All right, tracking then, I'm assuming. So what I want to do is then help us realize another benefit of thinking in terms of this way of progressing from the here to the there and the then is that it's about progressing and not perfecting. So you've heard us talk about this too a little bit, that perfection is never possible, but progression is always possible. And so in terms of literacy, we want to talk about that. We want to talk about what is possible. Also, we should talk about what's in your heads for what it should be, because that is perfection. And so part of coalescing would be to get out of our heads what perfection is, and then have a shared discussion of what meaningful progress would look like. And so that's where I want to get into one of the key concepts of progression theory, which is thriving. And that's what we're progressing toward. We're progressing toward, just one moment, toward a state of thriving. And here's what we're talking about is, have we done this? Have I brought up the definition to you and did the etymology here of thriving? Okay. So thriving is a really cool word that comes from the Norse tradition. And what it means is to grow or develop vigorously, grow or develop well or vigorously. Maybe another word for it would be to flourish, which I think is a cool word too. It comes from the French word for flower. So there's a growth metaphor in there and a natural progression element. And prospering. That thriving could mean a lot of things, actually. Thriving could mean well-being, health, happiness. And for us, we say thriving is making meaningful progress. But the reason this concept is so important to me is because of the etymology of it. That there's a sense of, it comes from this word thrifa, to grasp or to seize for oneself. And that to me is a vital piece of this, because it implies that there's a sense of clutching or grasping or taking a hold of. It's empowering is what I want to say, you know. Whereas if you look at a word we often use, and instead we talk about happiness, and that's a very important word to me too. I am somebody who's been very influenced by the field of positive psychology. So the study of happiness, this is what we want. What do we want for ourselves? Is, if you think about in your life or your loved ones' lives, what do they want for themselves? It's, I want to be okay. I want to know that things are good. I want to be safe. I want to be, I want to develop. I want to flourish. I want to prosper. I want to increase. So thriving, is the term for that, but happiness has been a term we've used instead. And for me, it's a little problematic when you dig a little deeper into happiness, because there's other words that sort of like have that hap to it, haphazard, or it happened, a benign word like it just happened. It connotes a sort of randomness or luck. And what we mean by that is, hey, there's you, and then there's the world outside of you, and the world outside of you is giving you something that you want. So you should feel happy. And I do, right? Isn't that the feeling? Like, oh, I'm really happy. This person I likes me, or this opportunity I wanted is available, and you're happy. The problem for me is that happiness is a little too random. It's not really within our, it's a little outside of our control. So I'm going to be happy when luck visits me and when the things I want come to me. But what I'm really hoping for is maybe a better strategy, one that's more in my own hands, literally almost, So thriving to me is about, it's about a state of growth. It's about a state of well-being. It's about a state of flourishing. And so we want that. And for me, I think about, okay, well, what are some of the other concepts that would help me understand it better? Because there's a lot to it. Like I said, happiness is just one, happiness and thriving and so forth. So I kind of drew it out this way, and I'll see what you all think of this. And I'll pause after I share this, because you might be having some thoughts here. So what I do with progression theory is just say, I just state the endpoints. There's a beginning and an ending to everything. And I'm not going to focus on what happens before the beginning or after the ending. This gets into other realms of things that I just want to talk about very pragmatic, real world stuff while we're here. So what we do is we kind of isolate things and we set up some boundaries. So we got beginning and ending, and everything in this plane of existence in the physical world has a beginning and an ending. And in between those 2 points, I'm reducing it to 2 states: survival and thriving. I know there's lots of different words, but what I'm trying to do with progression theory is reduce things to the BIBNO, to the basic but not obvious. So basic, BIBNO stands for that, basic but not obvious. And so here, reducing things to everything has a beginning and an ending is pretty basic. And the coalition would be an example of that. Every relationship, every organization, every life really can be described by this. I call it BEST because of the acronym BEST. But the idea is that between the beginning and ending of anything, there's 2 main states: survival and thriving. And of course, what I want to show you here is there's many levels of survival. There's bare bones survival. And then there's a level of survival that if we fall below it, that actually is the definition of an ending. All right. And then the same thing is true with thriving, in that there's many levels of thriving. And what if you personally haven't even reached your highest levels of thriving? Or, what if literacy hasn't yet? What if Kansas City hasn't yet? And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be sending you into groups here in a moment to talk about some of this. Like, what does thriving look like for the coalition or for literacy in Kansas City? And how do we get there? How is thriving achieved? So let me just stop there, see if there's and Tom or April, if there's anything that you'd like to add here, or that I should add, and then any comments from the group. And some reaction would be good to what I just said, because I know it's high level and it's like, it could leave you go, wow, that, like, it's ponderous, like, okay, let me think about it. Or it could just be like, what the heck is this guy talking about? So help me out a little bit. Yeah, I'd like to hear some reactions.
I mean, one of the things I was just thinking about was like, are we defining thriving and survival? Because it may be different than the general community. Like, they may see it totally different. So I don't know. Is that
Great
part
question.
of our job to define that? Or do we need to consider like what actual individuals in a community see when you're talking about literacy as a thriving state versus a survival state?
Good. Any thoughts or reactions to that?
I think my thought is a reaction to something you shared, that it came from like flourishing, like from the French for flower. Everything you said about thriving reminded me of the way as a teacher I thought about my children. Like, we want our children to thrive, so they're growing. It wasn't just sort of in the moment happiness. It was like moving forward on their path in the most beneficial way.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, so thriving is the thing we want for the things that we care about. If you think about it, right? It doesn't matter who you are or what background or whatever. If I know what a person cares about, I know what they want for it. They want it to thrive. They want it to grow, succeed, flourish, prosper, make progress, and all of that. Yes, it should, Lauren. It should. It's very Maslowian, because what is Maslow saying? He's saying each of us represents a potential, and what we need to do is actualize it. And progression theory is saying the same thing. We all together represent a potential for literacy in Kansas City. Now, will we actualize it, and to what degree? And that's what the coalescing process will be. If we coalesce well, then we will lead to greater outcomes for literacy in Kansas City. And Kimberly, to your point, I would love for this group to just take the start and initiate. And then, yes, let's absolutely have the community tell us. I think that's the values of the people of this group. It seems to me is that we absolutely are here for the community. We're doing this for the community. We don't want to be the savior complex. We want to be the servants. And in order to serve, we need to understand, but we also need to start somewhere. And that's where the leadership comes in. But progression theory is absolutely about that journey of, from what is our potential? What is the potential we have and what will get in the way of it? And I was creating, I was working on it this morning. We do a lot of work in the background. So I know y'all are like itching to get to like planning and stuff like that. And we will, but it is how we coalesce and how we come together, because if we don't do it right, the potential will be wasted. I'm sure there's other communities that have tried to do something similar and maybe they just couldn't get there. Maybe the people couldn't coalesce. Maybe they didn't have the resources. Maybe they didn't have the trust. Maybe they didn't have the familiarity or the humility or the, who knows, the leadership qualities. We don't know. The reason we're talking about this is how can we coalesce effectively? So let me say a few things and then we'll get you into groups. Real quick, go ahead. Yeah.
Can I chime in real quick? So I am going to push back a little bit on the survival and thrival, thing, because I really think that the vast majority of people go through the majority of their lives doing neither of those things. And there's this like middle thing where they're either like static or just sort of upholding status quo, or just sort of going day to day and going through the motions. And I think we as organizations get sucked into that too. And so I think the vast majority of our time is spent sort of static in a way. And I think that that's why, the literacy level in Kansas City has not risen over the last however many years, despite all of us and all of the resources and the government dollars and new ways of teaching and things like that. So I would say there's, a survival and there's a thrive, but the vast majority is static.
Yeah. I accept that. Absolutely. I mean, there is a whole lot of staying within that, just kind of that safety zone, or that's the present moment. And so a disruption will come along. You'll either adapt to it or you won't. I have a model for it if I could find it real quick, but I think it's a wonderful point. Any other comments or reflections on anything we've talked about with progression theory so far? So yeah, what I wanted to show you, to your point, Jillian, is that there's probably it's kind of this model is called the life cycle of organizations. You can think about your own like nonprofit. There's that entrepreneurial phase where you have to climb up the hill. You have to get people to know who you are, and there's so much effort. And by the time you get there, you look back, sometimes you're like, wow, if I knew how much it was going to take to get here, or even in your own life, you'd go, all right, I've been striving. And we do it to reach a plateau where we can take a break and things are well, and they're the way we want it, and status quo. Now, maybe we stay there forever. Maybe we want to change it. But even if we want to stay, change comes along anyway. And when that change comes along, it's disruptive, and either we will regress if we don't adjust to it, or we can find the right way to adjust and progress. And I think what we're saying is that, we've all independently as our organizations have striven to address literacy, and we've all made our accomplishments and our goals and so forth, but we've been plateauing, and there's change happening outside of our community, or changes being brought to our community. And we need to pay attention, and we need to do something different. We need to interrupt ourselves. And I think that's kind of what we've done. So I want to just tell you real quick, how do we thrive? How do we break out of the status quo and move? Well, the idea is, and I'll only say briefly, we won't really have much time for it, but I want to tell you so we can get you into the group breakouts. April, do we have those ready too, to get them into? Okay, so then in order to get to thriving, what we need to do is identify the factors that are necessary for thriving. We need to identify what does thriving look like for us? And then once we do, we could say, well, then what are the factors that would lead to the thriving? You know, maybe there's, I don't know, I'm going to say 5 factors, 4 to 6 factors that if we got them identified, and then we got them into the right condition, and we got them into the right state of alignment, then that will produce thriving. That's how thriving results. And if I had more time, I'd take you through examples. Like if we wanted a thriving garden, what are the factors that we would need to bring together? If we wanted a successful lemonade stand, April put together a really cool one. What are the factors necessary to have first of all, what would a thriving lemonade stand look like? And then what are the factors necessary in order to produce it? And this is what should be on your to-do list. You don't think about it that way, but when your to-do list are really, what are the factors necessary for what I'm trying to accomplish, or surviving and then thriving, or, you know, maybe maintaining the status quo. But then there's one more piece of progression theory, and I'm doing it really short shrift, but we'll get you into groups to talk about it, is you have resources. That's what I mean by engagement. Engagement isn't just paying attention. Engagement isn't just having a good attitude. Engagement, the word engage means to spend or to pledge. Like when we get engaged to be married, we're pledging all our resources to each other. What are we pledging? What are we willing to spend in order to get these factors into shape? Because if we get these factors into shape, into alignment, we'll have thriving, if they're the right factors. And this is generally the steps of or the pieces of progression theory. So what I'm thinking we can do is in groups talk about what does thriving look like for literacy in Kansas City? What do you think it would look like? And then what are those areas where we need to align? And that's part of the coalition building and the conversations, like programming or budget or, whatever. And then what are the resources? This is the engagement question. What are the resources we need as a collective? And April talked about some already. So I got to share the host with April. So she can make the groups. But in the meantime, while we're doing that, any questions about the homework or any reactions to the very quick introduction of thriving is the result of aligning the right factors, which is the result of engaging our resources into those factors? Thoughts, reactions to any of that?
I think it makes sense. I think it's a great first step to, heading toward where we want to be. We need to all be on the same page.
Yeah, right. Good. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what does thriving look like? What are the factors that need to be aligned? And then what are the resources that the coalition has and needs? So with that, are we good for breakouts? And 1 more minute? Okay, good. And then, yeah, I just looking at this discussion here, I really like that. Being careful to doing it for the community. And do we want to say why that is? Why we want to be careful about it? Probably because we want to make sure that if we are doing it for them, that we know what they want and that they've guided us in that. Yeah. That would be.
I think all too often, especially when you think about BIPOC communities that have been under-resourced and marginalized, is that people often want to solve for them and not with them. And they don't often even ask permission to be in community with them because more often than not, those communities know what they need. And they often have a plan to get there. So we're doing with them, not to them or for them. So we avoid falling into that savior complex or the great white hope or, what have you. And so we have to be very, very careful and tread lightly in that way.
Very good. Excellent. And this is a very important conversation within philanthropy and the nonprofit work and community organizing. And so, you know, we want to bring the best of all of it to this situation, and so doing it in partnership with our community would be a very important thing. We're not going to have too long for the discussion, but we know how vital it is. So let's come back in 10 minutes, to get as far as we can get. I know, but yeah, let's. April, want to take it away?
I'll open up the rooms, and I'd love it if someone in your room would volunteer to take notes, because I think we want to make sure and capture those discussions. So,
And is
we'll
this,
bring-
are the specific questions going to be visible to us?
I'll put them in chat right now. Hold on, give me just 1 second, and then you'll have them.
and those are in the in Basecamp as well.
Great. Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
But they're now in chat, so perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we'll bring you back in 10 minutes. This time, but I don't want us to forget what we what you discussed. So I have dropped in Basecamp and in the chat a link where you can put your notes from your group. So I'd love it if whoever was the note taker drop those notes in there, and we'll go on to next week.
Do we know our group numbers, or does it matter? Do we just pick an empty one?
I'm 3.
Okay.
I think you were 1, Kristen.
Okay.
That helps.
All right.
Is there any sort of update on the Royals advisory from the Royals advisory group? Have you guys met again?
The latest thing that has happened is, so they've put together a concept for a preliminary pilot. And the pilot is going to try out about 4 or 5 small initiative pieces with a small set of schools. So the schools include 4 KCPS elementaries that were chosen by the district, 4 charters that were selected because of who they've worked with or what needs they've shown, and 1 school from Hickman Mills. And at each of those, and 2 pre-Ks, 2 or 3, I lost track. But and so that's all going to roll out across the spring, like from February through May. And so the leaders of the district and the charters have been brought in to share that out with them. And then they're introducing it to teachers who are going to be participating and thinking through, to give their feedback on challenges that they see and opportunities to make it better. And then based on how all of that goes, they'll decide whether those same component pieces will be expanded out. The goal is the district, the whole charter the whole public sector, whether they'll just expand that out to everyone or whether they'll make changes or adjustments. And so I think
so you don't know what the pilot looks like they'll be constructing that.
No, the pilot, so they initially put forward an idea that had about 12 different initiative possibilities, and they've narrowed that down to, I think, 4 or 5 that they're going to roll out. It includes, I'm sorry, I don't have it all right in front of me, but it includes, something that's like school-based, where players show up at the school and support the classrooms, and something where families from each school selects a couple of classrooms for this pilot part. The families from all those classrooms go out to the park on a night where there's no game, and they're actually on the field for a big literacy night, with both child-focused and adult-focused opportunities to share. There's like a Royals little library. Each school will be presented with like a little free library type of thing to place where they would like in the community, and it will be filled and maintained through a school partnership. Something else and something else, but those kind of things, with a real emphasis on this. The push here is to bring awareness, pull people on board, give everyone kind of a role in it, and see which aspects of this work to really build enthusiasm, and which may not and should be adjusted before they try and scale up.
Okay, just for the sake of time, I think, do we want to schedule time for more conversation of this next week? Is this something that we want to maybe do an update on?
We're not meeting next week. It is Thanksgiving, and I think Kristen's going to be out the following week. But
And I don't know that much will change before January, but I'd be happy to share when I'm back if anything has updated, or to bring the more detailed. To be prepared is what I'm happy to be prepared for the question next time.
yeah, I mean, if there's interest, it sounds like this is very relevant to the group. So building that into our regular time, like a monthly update or, something like that, we can talk about that. Yeah, when Kristen's back and figure out the best way to do that.
Okay.
So we are at time. So I want to make sure that we remind you that we don't, as April just said, we're not meeting next week, but we do have 2 pieces of homework we'd ask you to do. One is to have another round of the Literacy Connections interviews. And then in the Basecamp, you'll find a document called My User's Manual. If you could just take some time, maybe about 10 minutes, and just complete this. It's kind of a self-reflection, and then we'll come back to this and talk about it in a couple of weeks. But if you don't necessarily have to turn it in. So I don't think we have time for the plus deltas because I want to honor your time. We're already 2 minutes after 12:30. So we will keep you posted, but we'll see you 2 weeks from today. Thank you all for
if you have any feedback for the session, please feel free to reach out to us directly. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Have a wonderful Thanksgiving week.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Other side.